I have the honor of doing the next presenting of the next speaker, Bill Pegg, who you all know. And today Bill will be sharing with us his theory and assumptions and new ideas about the holographic universe, a discussion of a possible paradigm for the basis of our psychology. So I give you Bill Pegg.
Trying to experiment here. I have a timer, see if I can learn how to work with that. I've been meditating since '73, and part of my experience in terms of meditation I've been blessed to have some pretty incredible experiences of cosmic consciousness, of being out of my body, doing a great many things that are written about in the books that some of us haven't experienced. So this, coupled with the occasion, I remember my mother being really upset and then getting off the phone. I said, "Well, what's the matter, Mom?" And she says, "Well, I just talked to Betty Jean, and she hasn't been doing anything that I told her to do, and she is sick as a dog." So I said, "Well, how did you know about this?" "Well, I just knew. So I said, "Okay. Now, I think this is not working right, so I'm going to turn it off." Okay. And so I, that is mine, isn't it?
Holographic.
Okay. The Holographic Universe is in session here. So let's see what we can do.
Bill, I can try to fix it for you. Put
Okay,
it back.
great. Thanks. Thanks so much. So that was one instance. There was another instance where she just picked up the phone and spoke to Joyce Ann. And at the time, Joyce Ann was suffering from a cancerous tumor in her ovaries, on her ovaries, and was hiding it from the family and hadn't spoken to anybody. So my mother again calls her up and says, "What's the matter? Tell me what's going on," and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So these kinds of experiences led me to wonder, like, what is really going on out here, okay? And can I speak to the priest or the rabbi, because at the schools I went to, there was a lot of Jewish culture around, and maybe find an answer or two. And actually, I kept coming up with very little, except skepticism. So over time, I really wanted to find out some concrete answers, and science really seemed to be the way. But the more I kind of got into it, the less I understood. And I realized, of course, as a non-math kind of person, I really needed some sort of explanation that kind of tied it together. So during the course of my experiences and studies as a meditator, I started with transcendental meditation, and then eventually became involved with Siva Yoga, which is based in Kashmiri Saivism. I began to understand that there were some folks out there who had understood what I was talking about and had found a way to describe it. So these people who had done these investigations or had seen were called seers or rishis, which is how I came to understand what Maharishi stood for. Okay, the name. So then here I come to EWP, and I'm in the midst of this big transformation, and I actually got a chance to hear about holographic breathwork and Stanley Grof. And he was also involved with the Siva Yoga, so that made a connection for me. However, as I began to read his material, I saw that he kept referring back to holograms. So what was he talking about? So what I did was I went out and I found this book called The Holographic Universe. And it's come to answer a lot of my questions. Let's see what we can do about advancing this. Nothing like technical issues. Okay, here. So we'll discuss a model or theory that attempts to explain both the brain and the universe, that the brain and the universe have similar characteristics. This theory, coupled with an understanding that consciousness is a common thread, could inform a robust examination and understanding of each and every element of psychology. Earlier we were hearing about art, earlier we were hearing about music. So I will discuss what a hologram is and how some of the features of a holographic brain, also another way to characterize it would be call it the mind-body field. So what is a hologram? It's a three-dimensional image formed by the interference, this is key, of light beams from a laser or other coherent light source. It could also be a photograph of an interference pattern that, when suitably illuminated, light shining on it, produces a three-dimensional image. It could be a three-dimensional image reproduced from a pattern of interference produced by a split coherent beam of radiation, that is, split light. Also, the pattern of interference itself. So we've all seen Star Wars and Star Trek and the holodeck and that kind of stuff. So what this depicts is somebody standing, a holographic image standing on a table being observed by some folks, okay? Let's see if we can get this to move. There we go. So without going into a whole lot of the technical aspects, this represents how they work. You know, your light beam being split, and then the interference pattern, which is these crossing red lines, semicircular lines, being resonant on this photographic surface. Now that photographic surface could also be in a crystal. So one of the interesting things is that this, since it could be in a crystal, well, I'll get into this a little bit more later, but basically what it amounts to is that, let's see, I think I'm getting a little out of sequence here, so I'll go on with this. Moving right along, we're trying to understand the brain, how it works, how it functions, okay? So this noted researcher, Karl Pribram, who was also cited by Stanley Grof, came to understand that the brain stores and organizes data in a holographic fashion. In the old days, we thought that memories were located here, or here, or here. What we've come to find out is that they were not localized and that they were distributed throughout the brain. Several experiments demonstrated that removal of major portions of animal brains did not, NOT, diminish memory. Just as it's possible for a piece of holographic film to contain all the information of the whole, each portion of the brain contains all the information to recall a whole memory. Imagine a crystal that contained the interference patterns for a hologram. Then if you break it up into small pieces, take a diamond, and you break it up into small pieces, and you shine a light through each of the pieces, then each piece will project a whole image. This shows the information is stored in a non-local way, non-locality. There is a math for this, so those of us that want a more rigorous approach can look to Jean B.J., did I say that right, Fourier? He developed a mathematical way of converting any pattern, no matter how complex, into a language of simple waves. He also showed how these waveforms could be converted back into the original pattern. These equations are known as Fourier transforms. Another scientist used these equations to convert a picture of an object into the blur of interference patterns. Remember earlier I showed you the image and how the interference patterns were placed on a photographic plate on a piece of holographic film and convert them back into an image. Okay, so these Fourier transforms describe mathematically how it goes one direction or the other. Karen and Russell de Valois. Anybody have any suggestions of pronunciation? Oh, okay. Came to the conclusion as a result of experiments that the brain was using Fourier mathematics, the same mathematics holography employed to convert visual images into the interference patterns of holographic storage. This finding, among others, convinced Pribram that his theory of the holographic brain was correct. David Bohm, a physicist, followed up on other scientists' development of quantum theory and Niels Bohr's discovery of non-locality. Remember, the memory in the brain is stored in a non-local way. Or entanglement, as he went on to develop a theory that the universe exhibited holographic principles of operation. What is entanglement? Once two subatomic particles are brought into contact, they become entangled. The actions on one will always influence the other, no matter how far apart they are. So imagine one of these things embedded in a fabric, another one's embedded in the fabric, and they become entangled. Then no matter how you move the fabric, they're in relation again. Non-locality is the theory that at the subquantum level, distance is meaningless. Non-locality is just another way of saying entanglement. In physics, they describe gaseous elements or elements of gas that are specifically similar as plasmas. And is the name for a cloud of electrons that tend to isolate foreign elements within as if the cloud or plasma was a living thing. That kind of blew my mind, that something that was non-living could really organize stuff, like isolate it. Almost if you've ever watched under a microscope activities of amoebas and protozoas and stuff like that, this irritant issue tends to get isolated. So if a cloud of gas of electrons could do that, then it's speaking to some profound subtlety. This behavior of the parts was actually organized by the whole. This aspect of entanglement of the elements of a plasma suggests the behavior of a fabric or an implicate order. Okay. Yes, 4 minutes, okay. The order of things from expressed or explicate to embedded or implicate is similar to the holographic projection or expression, which is expression explicate from the interference patterns, which are the implicate. The order of things from manifest to the subtle is also seen as the physical to the spiritual. I realize that I'm making great leaps here, but I'm trying to whet your appetite rather than really teach a 3-credit course. The physicist Tiller even suggests that the universe itself started as a subtle energy field and gradually became dense and material. This divine pattern functioned as a template influencing and molding increasingly less subtle levels of the cosmic energy field on down the line by a series of holograms, until it eventually coalesced into a hologram of a physical universe. So, how am I doing on time? Okay, great. Stan Grof explored our own connections to the subtle realms through his holographic breath work. His work, based in part on holographic theory, enables our consciousness to change its focus from one aspect of our holographic reality, Maya, to another. Holographic breath works as well as LSD and other tools and techniques can be used to explore the holographic pathways into the subtle realms of the mind-body field. These subtle realms may include Jung's archetypes and may extend to realms that are inhabited by other kinds of thought forms or even other kinds of beings. So we've discussed what a hologram is and how it relates to the body-mind field, at least I hinted at it. We discussed and hinted at non-locality entanglement as functions of holograms. We hinted at how a change of the focus of consciousness can effect or affect a change in awareness. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope some of these ideas may. So, questions?
So you were saying in the beginning that this relates to Kashmiri Saivism?
Yeah, the statement by Tiller, the physicist Tiller. If you switch a little bit of the languaging around, the bottom line, he's talking about the Spanda Shiva. Shiva's Spanda. I'm a little wired here. Shiva's Spanda, okay? So as a outgrowth of the implicate order, if you will. And then as that progressed, okay? So I was have a good Ganuptas, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Trident of Shiva, he lays that out, and Mike Dyczkowski in Doctrine of Vibration also lays that out, how it goes from the subtlest or the finest to the gross. Does that answer your question?
So the Spanda are like holograms also? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that this theory, this concept, okay, this model explains how it captures as an explanation some of the elements of Shiva. I'm not saying that it's exactly it. I'm saying, these are some of the characteristics, these are some of the ways that it kind of fits and flows together. And if you have a non-locality of and an entanglement such as my mother and her daughter, okay, then there could be such a thing as telepathy that, quote unquote, is faster than the speed of light, or doesn't go by telephone wires or cell phones or what have you. So, does that respond to your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir. He pulled rank, so.
There was a lot of discussion and conversation in different academic communities about the holographic paradigm back in the 80s. I'm not as aware of that this conversation is continuing today in academia, in the 21st century, and I'm wondering if you have done some inquiry about why is that so, and if it's not so, if you're aware of current developments, for example, in modern neuroscience, they don't talk about Pribram and the hologramic, although it's kind of almost like a maverick, it's like they don't pay attention to this theory, and so I'm just wondering, if your own research, if you have done research on contemporary scholarship on this paradigm, and also if you have found as a thing that is not really discussed today, why do you think it's so? Why do you think this is not really fashionable as it used to be like in the 80s?
Fundamentally, the research and the exploration of it for me is new. It's only last summer that I found out about this, and then I've been trying to digest this up to the present time. That's one. Two, it was just a few weeks ago that I bought Hiroshi Motoyama's book on the theories of the chakras, and started really reading that. Okay. Three, when I was reading Dr. Field's book on the other brain, it seems that Western science is just beginning to come to grips with the concept of matrices and the subtle layers and of the complexities that depart from their old paradigm of the linear neurology and go to the spatial or circular relational complexities of I've forgotten what you call the cells now, but the in the brain there are the
Neurons?
well, there's neurons which are linear, and that glial cells.
Oh.
The glial cells. Okay. Well, it turns out that a lot of the reason why, when you and I were in class, I was concerned about some of the comments that were made about stages of development and that kind of thing were because it appears that as the body matures from the zygote forward, okay, through youth, as the brain matures, there are layers of these glial cells that are informed by the stimulus and go through steps and stages of development. To come back to your question, I just wonder how, whether Pribram and Bohm were a quantum level, if you will, beyond where everybody else was. There needs to be some filler so they can get to the point of appreciating what they were saying. That's my intuitive sense, okay? So thank you for pointing out that area of investigation.
Sure.
So you were next, and then you.
I have some insider knowledge because I know you're going to pursue your doctorate in transformative learning.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering if you could share with us where these ideas might project you forward in your professional work. Do you see this being applicable with work with groups, with leadership? What do you
Well,
anticipate you might be doing with this later?
Basically, what I wanted to do was to get to the point where I was grounded in fairly non-controvertible facts, so to speak. Have some element of a positivist, basis for going forward. Okay. What I know is that as it was presented in Karl Whitfield's class in Eastern Theories, is that there's a comment in the Vedas that says that vibration is the core of the universe. So I see an unbroken string or of causality, of logical development or whatever, from the doctrine of vibration. And listen to James Brown or Bootsy Collins or, the gentleman that was speaking upstairs. He was talking about drumming and vibration and African drumming and that kind of stuff. So that there are common threads among people. You see this as a basis for a common understanding rooted in reality. So when I bring groups together and I'm trying to facilitate leadership or facilitate group communication, I need to have some way that I can inspire a common sense of a common felt experience of appreciation, of love, of a sense of wholeness, and so when I do that with non-didactic approaches, meaning music and various other things, then when I come with a a description of what the mission is, what the vision is and what the mission is, then I can bring it all together and my credibility is there first. So when I step into the space, then it all is held in a way that they can accept from whatever perspective they might be standing in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could see also make an argument for the versatility of the tools or strategies you use to work with the groups as a way to create a non-local memory stream or a matrix within which the group is working.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. You had a question?
Very fascinating for the holographic theory. And I was wondering if you can, I just read an article in neuroscience that talked about memories of post-traumatic. And one of the things that they said that this memory spreads in the brain to different areas. So the visual can be in one place, and the horrified can be in the amygdala, and then what how they try to help these people now is target medicine maybe only to the place where fear is evoked. So you still have the memory, but it won't create fears. So they were really talking about different areas in the brain, so that the memory goes to different areas, but each area has a different role. And I was wondering if you can say what you think of this theory compared to, if I understand
Yes.
right, that this says that everything is everywhere. So
Well, two things. Two things. There seems to be a bit of a division, as far as my understanding, between the stored memory and the operational function. Okay? So, I have two operational functions here called hands. Okay? They're not all over my body. Okay? However, they have access to everything. So one is the memory, right? And then one is the actual function. So that's where I see the difference. Now, let's take, in response to I want to combine your two questions and speak to spiritual counseling, okay? So this person gets a tremendous shock called an IUD to their mind-body field, okay? The sound, the physical air pressure, all of that disrupts the body so completely that they continue to relive it, okay? So with a holographic frame of mind, I'm not gonna be only worried about the amygdala, however you say that, I'm tongue-tied today, or some other physiological thing. What I can do, if they're available to it, what I can do is bring them into a trance moment, okay? I can bring some music along. I can get their conscious participation and stuff like that, so that they don't see themselves all because of the blast, okay? But they can also see, and when I say see, I mean you have 7 chakras, okay? They can see themselves in another dimension, okay? In a peaceful dimension. And if, through this concept of the holographic universe, we understand the truth, which is to say, yes, we have the physicality, but we also have the reality of the astral and the etheric. So maybe what I can do is do what I personally, Bill Pegg, believe is done on a regular basis, is re-access the etheric so that I can be whole again. Yes, I'm in my body. I gotta go to the bathroom, I gotta tie my shoes, I gotta deal with the wife, or the husband. But what's also true is I can step into the etheric for a moment and be peaceful and be whole. And maybe my limb got blown off. I can remember that what it was like to have it, and also remember now that I don't have it, and readjust, because I have access to not only my essence, but I have access to the love that you as therapists present.